The morning sun filtered through the curtains as I scrubbed the floor on my knees, my fingers raw from hours of cleaning. I had been up since 5, determined to make everything perfect before Sarah arrived. My mother-in-law had standards, impossibly high ones that seemed designed specifically to make me fail. "Don't forget to dust the ceiling fan in the guest room," Mark called from the living room where he lounged with his coffee and newspaper. My husband hadn't lifted a finger all morning, content to direct operations from his comfortable spot on the sofa we'd bought together 3 years ago when we first moved into this suburban Boston home. "Already done," I replied, trying to keep the weariness from my voice. I pushed a strand of hair from my face with the back of my wrist, careful not to smudge my forehead with cleaning solution. The pressure of Sarah's visit weighed on me like stones piled one by one onto my chest. Each tick of the clock brought her arrival closer, and with it, the inevitable criticism. I could already hear her voice. "Oh, Emma, you missed a spot there." Or, "Is this how you normally fold towels?" Always with that smile that never reached her eyes. Mark and I had been married for 5 years, and in that time, I'd never once received a genuine compliment from his mother. I'd tried everything, cooking her favorite meals, remembering her birthday with thoughtful gifts, even taking an interest in her gardening hobby, though I could barely keep a cactus alive. Nothing worked. To her, I would always be the woman who stole her precious son. "The bathroom needs another once-over," Mark said, appearing in the doorway with empty mug in hand. He set it on the counter I'd just cleaned, leaving a ring of coffee. I bit my tongue and nodded. "I'm on it," I said, stretching my sore back as I stood. "What time did you say her flight gets in?" "Noon, but with traffic from Logan, probably around 1:30. He glanced at his watch. "You've still got time." Then he disappeared back to the living room, the sound of the TV following a moment later. In the bathroom, I scrubbed at non-existent grime, the harsh chemicals making my eyes water. Or maybe those were tears. These days, it was hard to tell the difference. I caught my reflection in the mirror. Pale face, tired eyes, hair hastily pulled back. I barely recognized myself anymore. There was a time when Mark and I had been happy, before his promotion at the law firm, before we moved to this larger house in this better neighborhood to impress people I didn't care about, before his mother's opinions became the measuring stick for our life together. I remembered our tiny apartment in Cambridge, how we used to cook together in that cramped kitchen, laughing when we bumped into each other, stealing kisses between stirring pots. Mark had been different then, present, engaged, my partner. Now he was just another voice telling me what I was doing wrong. At noon, I finally stopped cleaning. The house gleamed, every surface spotless, every item in its place. I showered quickly and put on the outfit I'd carefully selected days ago, a modest navy dress that Sarah had once commented wasn't completely terrible on me. I applied light makeup, trying to look fresh despite my exhaustion. The doorbell rang at exactly 1:27. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and opened the door with a practiced smile. There she stood, Sarah Miller, petite but somehow imposing in her expensive beige pantsuit, silver hair perfectly coiffed, pearls gleaming at her throat. "Emma, dear," she said, air-kissing both my cheeks. "You look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" And so it began. Mark appeared behind me, instantly transforming into the devoted son. He hugged his mother warmly, took her bags, complimented her appearance. I stood aside, watching the performance I'd seen countless times before. "The house looks acceptable," Sarah said as she walked through our living room, running a finger along the mantel as if checking for dust. "Though I noticed the hedges could use trimming. First impressions, you know." "I'll get to those tomorrow, Mom," Mark promised, though we both knew he wouldn't. It would be another task added to my invisible list. Sarah settled into our guest room, the best room in the house, with the morning light and view of the garden. I'd filled it with fresh flowers and her favorite lavender-scented candles. She noticed none of it, only commenting that the sheets weren't ironed properly. Dinner was a tense affair. I'd prepared salmon with dill sauce, a recipe from Sarah's own cookbook that she'd published years ago when she had a brief career as a local cooking personality on Boston's Channel 5. I'd followed it to the letter, but still, she frowned at her first bite. "It's a bit overdone, isn't it?" she said, looking at Mark as if I wasn't there. "I've always taught that salmon should flake, not crumble." "It's delicious, Mom," Mark said, though he hadn't taken a bite yet. Then lower to me, maybe a little dry. I stared at my plate, appetite gone. This was my life now, striving for approval that would never come, living in a house that didn't feel like home, with a husband who couldn't see what was happening, or worse, saw and didn't care. Later that night, after Sarah had retired to the guest room, I found Mark in our bedroom, already in bed with his laptop. "Your mother seems well," I said, testing the waters. He responded, not looking up. "She mentioned the guest room mattress is too soft. We should look into that." I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted beyond words. "Mark, do you ever notice how she speaks to me?" He finally glanced up, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "The constant criticism. The way nothing I do is ever good enough," he sighed, closing his laptop. "She's just particular, Emma. You know that. It's not personal. It feels personal when I'm the only one receiving it. You're being sensitive. She's the same way with everyone. Not with you," I said quietly. He rolled his eyes. "Can we not do this tonight? She's only here for a week. Just try harder, okay? Try harder." As if I hadn't been trying my hardest for 5 years. As if my trying was the problem. I got ready for bed in silence, slipping under the covers as far from Mark as possible. As I stared at the ceiling, listening to his even breathing, I wondered when exactly I had become a guest in my own life, and how much longer I could stand it. 3 days into Sarah's visit, I was running on fumes. Every meal had been critiqued. Every conversation had somehow circled back to my shortcomings as a wife, homemaker, and human being. I'd taken to waking up before dawn just to have a moment of peace before the day's performance began. That morning, I stood at the kitchen counter preparing lunch, chicken salad sandwiches with homemade mayo, the way Sarah had taught me yesterday after declaring my original attempt inedible. My hands worked methodically while my mind wandered, thinking about the email I'd received from my old boss at the publishing house. They needed a freelance editor for an upcoming project. Before marriage, I'd been a rising star in Boston's literary editing scene. Now, I couldn't remember the last time I'd read a book for pleasure, let alone worked on one professionally. "Emma, where are the cloth napkins I brought you from Providence last Christmas?" Sarah's voice cut through my thoughts as she entered the kitchen in her designer loungewear. "In the drawer by the fridge," I answered, pointing with my elbow as my hands were covered in mayonnaise. "The blue ones, right?" She made a show of searching, sighing dramatically. "No, the cream ones with the embroidered edges. Honestly, don't you remember anything I give you?" I bit back a response about how she'd definitely given me blue napkins, not cream ones. It wasn't worth the argument. "Sorry, I'm not sure where those would be." "I suppose we'll have to use these then," she said, pulling out the blue napkins with distaste. "Though they don't match the plates at all." Mark wandered in, freshly showered though it was nearly noon. He'd taken the week off for his mother's visit, but spent most of it sleeping late and catching up on sports highlights. "Something smells good," he said, peering over my shoulder at the sandwiches. "Your wife is finally making my chicken salad recipe correctly," Sarah said, her voice bright with false praise, though she's still chopping the celery too large. I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw, but kept chopping. Just 4 more days. I could survive 4 more days. "Hey, Mom, I thought we could take you to that new restaurant in Cambridge tonight," Mark said. "The one owned by that chef you like from TV." Sarah clapped her hands together. "Oh, that would be lovely. I was just telling my friend Judith about it. She'll be so jealous." "Emma made reservations yesterday," Mark added, throwing me a bone. Sarah's smile dimmed slightly as she glanced my way. "How thoughtful. Though I do hope you requested a table away from the kitchen. Last time you arranged a dinner out, we were practically eating with the dishwashers. That had been at Mark's birthday dinner 2 years ago, when the restaurant had made a mistake with our reservation. I'd spent 20 minutes arguing with the host to get us any table at all. Sarah had never let me forget it. "It's taken care of," I said, keeping my voice level as I placed the sandwiches on plates. "Table by the window, just like you prefer." We sat down to lunch, Sarah immediately rearranging her plate and utensils. I'd made iced tea as well, garnished with mint from our garden. A garden I tended alone, though Sarah always complimented Mark on his tomatoes. "So, Mom, Mark said between bites. How's the condo renovation going? Sarah launched into a detailed account of her kitchen remodel, complete with criticisms of her contractor. I half listened, nodding at appropriate intervals while my mind drifted again to that email. The deadline to accept the editing job was tomorrow. A small flame of desire flickered in my chest at the thought of doing something for myself again. Emma? Are you even listening? Sarah's sharp tone snapped me back. Sorry, yes. You were saying about the backsplash. I was asking if you'd pass the salt, but clearly your mind is elsewhere. She turned to Mark. Your wife seems distracted today. Emma's fine, Mark said dismissively. Pass Mom the salt, would you? I reached for the salt shaker, but my elbow knocked against my glass. Iced tea splashed across the table, some of it landing on Sarah's sleeve. Oh, she gasped, jumping up as if scalded, though the drink was cold. My goodness. I'm so sorry, I said, immediately grabbing napkins to mop up the spill. Let me help. Don't touch me, she snapped, dabbing at her sleeve. This is silk, it'll stain. Mark, get me some club soda quickly. Mark rushed to obey while I continued cleaning the table, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I really am sorry, Sarah. It was an accident. Accidents seem to happen quite often around you, she replied icily. That's why I never lend you anything valuable. Remember my pearl earrings? 3 years ago, I'd borrowed a pair of earrings for a charity event. When I'd returned them, Sarah had insisted one was damaged, though I couldn't see any difference. I'd offered to have them repaired or replaced, but she'd waved me off with a martyred sigh about sentimental value. Mark returned with the club soda and a fresh towel, attending to his mother as if she'd been wounded in battle. It's probably ruined, Sarah moaned, though the tiny spot was already fading. And this was brand new from Neiman's. I'll pay for dry cleaning, I offered. She gave me a look that could freeze fire. As if that would help. Some things can't be fixed once they're damaged, Emma. The way she said my name made it clear she wasn't just talking about the blouse. Mark shot me a warning glance, his standard, don't make this worse face. I stood up, gathering the now soaked napkins. I'll get lunch cleaned up. I've lost my appetite anyway, Sarah announced. I think I'll lie down before dinner. All this excitement has given me a headache. She swept out of the room like an offended queen, leaving Mark and me in awkward silence. Nice going, he muttered, once she was out of earshot. Something in me snapped. The tiny flame that had been kindling suddenly roared to life. Are you kidding me right now? I hissed. It was an accident, Mark. A glass of tea, not a vial of acid. He looked startled by my tone. You know how she gets. You could have been more careful. More careful. I've spent 5 years being nothing but careful around her, and it's never enough. When was the last time you stood up for me? When was the last time you were on my side? I am on your side, he protested weakly. No, you're not. You're on her side. You always have been. I threw the wet napkins into the sink with more force than necessary. Do you even see what's happening here? How she treats me? How you let her? Mark ran a hand through his hair, his go-to gesture when uncomfortable. You're overreacting. She's just set in her ways. Her ways involve treating me like I'm nothing, and you enable it. That's not fair. She's my mother, Emma. And I'm your wife. My voice broke on the last word. Or at least I'm supposed to be. Most days it feels like I'm just the help around here. Mark's expression hardened. You need to calm down. We have dinner reservations tonight, and I don't want any drama. Of course. Heaven forbid Sarah's evening be disrupted by my inconvenient feelings. Fine, I said, suddenly exhausted. No drama. I'm going for a walk. I grabbed my phone and keys, not bothering to change out of my stained blouse. As I stepped outside, the June air hit my face, warm and surprisingly sweet. I walked without direction, just needing to be away from that house and the 2 people in it who made me feel so small. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The email notification reminded me of the editing offer. Without hesitation, I typed out a quick acceptance. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt monumental. The first decision I'd made for myself in longer than I could remember. When I returned home an hour later, the house was quiet. I found a note on the counter in Mark's handwriting. Mom wasn't feeling well. Took her to dinner alone so she could come back early if needed. Don't wait up. They hadn't even bothered to call me. I stood in our spotless kitchen, reading those words over and over. The finality of what was happening, what had been happening for years, settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't a partnership. This wasn't even a life. It was a slow surrender, a gradual erasure of who I used to be. And I was finally, irrevocably done. I didn't cry when I made my decision. There was a strange calm that settled over me, like the sudden silence after a thunderstorm. I moved through the house with purpose, mentally cataloging what was truly mine, what I needed, what I could leave behind. Mark and Sarah wouldn't be back for hours. The fancy restaurant in Cambridge was known for its long, leisurely dining experience, a fact I'd considered when making the reservation. Now it gave me the time I needed. First, I called Lily, my friend from before Mark, before this house, before I'd slowly cut ties with everyone who once knew the real me. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. My fault entirely. When she answered, the surprise in her voice was painful to hear. "Emma, is everything okay?" I almost laughed at the question. Nothing had been okay for a very long time. "I need a favor," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "A big one." To her credit, Lily didn't hesitate. Anything. Within 30 minutes, she arrived with her SUV and no questions, just a fierce hug that nearly broke my carefully constructed composure. We worked quickly, methodically. I packed clothes, my laptop, important documents hidden in my desk drawer, my grandmother's quilt, the first edition Austen novels my father had given me before he died, my journals and the photo albums from before marriage. "Do you need this?" Lily asked, holding up the crystal vase Sarah had given us as a wedding present. I shook my head. Nothing from her, nothing from them. It struck me how little I truly wanted from this house. 5 years of marriage, and what I valued could fit in a few suitcases and boxes. I left my wedding ring on the dresser, beside the framed photo of Mark and me on our honeymoon, the last time I remembered being genuinely happy with him. As I packed my books, I came across my old leather planner from my publishing days, filled with notes and contacts. I flipped through it, remembering the ambitious young editor I'd been. Somewhere along the way, I'd let that woman disappear, replaced by this shadow version who waited for permission to have opinions. "Are you sure about this?" Lily asked gently as we loaded the last box into her car. "You could stay with me for a few days. Think it through." I looked back at the house, the perfectly maintained colonial with its manicured lawn and tasteful decor that had never felt like mine. "I've been thinking it through for 5 years," I replied. "I'm done." We drove to the small apartment Lily had arranged through her cousin in Somerville. It was a studio above a bookstore, sparsely furnished but clean. Most importantly, it was a place Mark would never think to look. "It's paid through the month," Lily explained, helping me carry in my belongings. "After that, it's month to month if you want to stay." I hugged her again, overwhelmed by her kindness after so much time apart. "I don't know how to thank you." "You can thank me by remembering who you are," she said fiercely. "The real Emma. The one who used to argue about books until 4 a.m. and had opinions about everything." I smiled at the memory. "I'm not sure she exists anymore." "She does. She just got buried for a while." After Lily left, promising to check on me tomorrow, I sat on the unfamiliar bed in the quiet apartment. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about making dinner or keeping the house perfect, or modulating my voice to avoid criticism. The silence felt like a gift. I unpacked slowly, arranging my books on the small shelf by the window, hanging my clothes in the tiny closet. Each item I placed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. These were my things, my choices. No one would comment on them or make me justify their existence. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Where are you? Mom's not feeling well. We came home early." I stared at the message. No concern for me, just irritation that I wasn't there to deal with Sarah's latest illness. I turned off my phone without replying. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake in the unfamiliar room, listening to the sounds of the city outside, so different from our quiet suburban street. Doubt crept in around the edges of my resolve. Was I overreacting? Should I have tried harder? What would people say? Then I remembered Sarah's dismissive tone when she talked about my little editing career. Mark's constant disappointment. The way I'd stopped speaking up, stopped disagreeing, stopped being. No, I wasn't overreacting. If anything, I had underreacted for years. Morning came with pale light filtering through curtains I hadn't chosen. I made coffee in a small pot I'd brought from my pre-marriage apartment and sat by the window, watching Somerville wake up. People hurried past, heading to work or school or wherever their lives were taking them, free to choose their own directions. My phone remained off. I wasn't ready for Mark's anger or manipulations. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked my email. The publishing house had already sent the manuscript for my editing project. I downloaded it eagerly, skimming the first few pages. It was a debut novel, the author's voice fresh and distinctive. I felt a flicker of excitement, professional excitement, that I hadn't experienced in years. Around noon, I finally turned my phone back on. 27 missed calls from Mark, 13 voicemails, 42 text messages ranging from concerned to furious. "Where the hell are you? My mother is worried sick. This isn't funny, Emma. If you're trying to make some kind of point, it's childish. Please just come home so we can talk about this. You're embarrassing me. I can't believe you do this to me." To him. Everything was always about him. The last message, sent just an hour ago, was different. I called the police. They said since you left voluntarily and took your things, there's nothing they can do. Is this really what you want? To throw away our marriage over one dinner? One dinner. As if that was all it had been. I typed a response, deleting and rewriting it several times before settling on, "I'm safe. I need time away. Please don't contact me." His reply was immediate. "You can't just leave like this. What about our life together? What about Mom? What about Mom?" There it was. The perfect summary of our entire marriage. I didn't respond again. Instead, I called a lawyer friend of Lily's who had agreed to speak with me. Carol was direct and practical, walking me through my options. Massachusetts was a no-fault divorce state. We had no children. The house was in both our names, but I could file for an equitable division of assets. "The important thing right now is to establish your independence," Carol advised. "Open your own bank account if you don't have one. Change your passwords. Create a paper trail of your separation date." I took notes, my hand steady. This wasn't just an emotional break, it was a practical one too. I needed to rebuild my life from the foundation up. After the call, I walked to a nearby bank and opened a new account, depositing the modest savings I'd managed to keep separate over the years. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then I went to the bookstore below my apartment, a tiny independent shop called Turning Pages. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The smell of paper and ink wrapped around me like an embrace. An older woman with silver-streaked hair looked up from behind the counter. "Welcome to Turning Pages. Let me know if you need help finding anything." I wandered through the narrow aisles, running my fingers along the spines of books. So many stories, so many voices. I'd forgotten how much I loved being surrounded by words. "Are you our new upstairs neighbor?" the woman asked as I approached the counter with a paperback novel I'd selected. I nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" "Small building." She smiled warmly. "I'm Rita, by the way. I own this little slice of literary heaven." "Emma," I replied, offering my hand. "I'm new to the area." "Well, Emma, new to the area. That book's on the house. Welcome gift." I started to protest, but she waved me off. "I insist. Besides, you look like you could use a good story right now." Something about her kindness, freely given without expectation, made my carefully constructed composure crack. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Rita didn't seem bothered. She simply reached beneath the counter and pulled out a box of tissues. "First day on your own is always the hardest," she said gently. "How did you—" "Been there myself, honey. Recognize the look." She pushed the tissues closer. "Whatever you're walking away from, I'm guessing it's for a good reason." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Well, you've got a friend down here if you need one. An excellent taste in books." She nodded at my selection. A novel about a woman finding herself after losing everything. I left the bookstore with my gift clutched to my chest, feeling lighter than I had in years. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea, reading my new book as darkness fell over Somerville. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from Mark, but I didn't check them. For the first time in a very long time, I was listening to my own voice instead. 3 days passed in my new life. I established a routine quickly. Wake up early, make coffee, work on my editing project for a few hours, then explore my new neighborhood. Somerville had a vibrant energy that reminded me of my pre-Mark days, when I'd lived in Cambridge with 2 roommates and spent weekends at local cafes reading manuscripts. Rita from the bookstore introduced me to a writing group that met in her back room on Wednesday evenings. "They're good people," she assured me. "No pressure to share anything of your own. You can just listen if you want." I went, sitting quietly in the corner as 5 strangers read pieces of their souls aloud. A young man with tattoos covering his arms wrote about growing up in Dorchester with a schizophrenic mother. An older woman shared a memoir piece about losing her wife to cancer. A college student read angry poetry about climate change. Their voices were raw, honest, unfiltered. When they asked about me, I simply said I was an editor taking a break from my regular life. They accepted this without question, as if temporary reinventions were perfectly normal. Perhaps in their world they were. Mark's messages had slowed but not stopped. Each one alternated between anger and manipulation. "Your behavior is embarrassing us both. Mom is thinking of cutting her visit short because you've upset her so much. Is this about the editing job? Fine, you can take it. Just come home. I don't understand why you're punishing me like this. At least tell me where you are so I know you're safe." That last one almost made me laugh. He'd never worried about my safety before, emotional or otherwise. On the 4th day, Lily came by with groceries and news. "He's been calling everyone," she reported, unpacking fresh vegetables into my mini fridge. "Me, our old college friends, even your cousin in New Hampshire, trying to track you down. What have people been telling him? That they haven't heard from you, which is true for most of them." She gave me a pointed look. "You really dropped off the map these past few years, Em." The truth in her words stung. "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be better." She squeezed my hand. "And maybe call your cousin Jen. She's worried." I nodded, making a mental note to reconnect with the family members I'd neglected. Mark had never liked my nosy relatives, finding excuses to avoid family gatherings until eventually, I stopped going too. "There's something else," Lily said, her expression turning serious. "He came by my place last night. Showed up around 10, completely worked up. Said he knew I was hiding you." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "I told him to leave before I called the cops. He didn't like that." She shrugged. "My neighbor Tom heard the commotion and came out. Mark left after that, but he wasn't happy." "I'm so sorry, Lily. I never meant to drag you into this." "Hey, I volunteered, remember?" She waved off my apology. "But you might want to think about what you're going to do next. He's escalating." After she left, I paced my small apartment, anxiety building. Mark had always been controlling, but never physically intimidating. Still, I'd never defied him like this before. I didn't know what he might do. I called Carol, the lawyer, updating her on the situation. She recommended filing a temporary restraining order as a precaution. "Based on what you've told me about his behavior, we have grounds," she explained. "It would legally prevent him from approaching you or your friends." "Isn't that extreme?" I asked, still finding it hard to think of Mark as dangerous. "It's preventative," she corrected gently, "and it establishes a legal record of your concerns, which can be important later." I agreed to meet her at the courthouse the next morning. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every sound outside my window. By dawn, I'd made another decision. Mark needed to know this wasn't a temporary tantrum or a negotiating tactic. This was an ending. After my meeting with Carol, where a sympathetic judge granted the temporary order, I texted Lily, "Need one more favor. Meet me at the house at 2? Mark will be at work." We pulled up to my former home in Lily's car, parking down the street just in case. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, pristine and soulless. I used my key to enter quickly, Lily keeping watch. Inside, the evidence of Sarah's continued presence was everywhere. Her cardigan draped over a chair, her special tea in the kitchen, her reading glasses on the coffee table. I ignored it all, heading straight upstairs. In Mark's bedroom, I gathered the last of my essential items. My birth certificate from the locked box in the closet, the small jewelry box containing my grandmother's pearls, the external hard drive with all my professional work from before marriage. As I moved through the house one last time, I noticed small changes. My books had been rearranged on the shelves. Sarah's photographs now occupied spaces where mine had been. They were already erasing me, replacing me with their version of what this home should be. In the kitchen, I stopped short. On the refrigerator was a handwritten list in Sarah's unmistakable cursive, "Potential dinner party guests." It was dated 2 days after I'd left, as if my absence was merely an inconvenience to be worked around. The casual cruelty of it knocked the breath from my lungs. "Emma, we should go," Lily urged from the doorway. "We've been here 15 minutes already." I nodded, but first I had one more task. From my bag, I took the letter I'd written the night before. 8 pages of everything I'd never said. All the accumulated hurts, the slow diminishment of my personhood, the betrayals large and small. It wasn't angry or hysterical. It was simply true. I placed it on the kitchen table, weighed down with Sarah's crystal paperweight. Then, on the whiteboard we kept by the phone for messages, I wrote in clear black letters, "I am not your maid. I am not your doormat. I am not your audience. I am free." It wasn't poetic or profound, but it was honest. I'd spent years being those things for Mark and Sarah, the invisible support system, the captive audience for their egos, the punching bag for their insecurities. No more. "That should make things clear," Lily said, reading over my shoulder. "I hope so," I replied. "Let's go." As we left, I placed my house key on the entryway table. I wouldn't be needing it again. Back at my apartment, I felt lighter, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. The restraining order was in place. The message was delivered. The legal separation papers were being prepared. There was nothing left to do but move forward. Around 6 that evening, my phone exploded with notifications. Mark, discovering my visit and message. The texts came rapid fire, a volcanic eruption of shock and rage. "How dare you come to my house behind my back?" That childish message. "Really, Emma? You think you can just leave? After everything I've done for you? My mother is beside herself seeing what you wrote. You're clearly having some kind of breakdown. I'm calling your parents. They need to talk some sense into you." That last threat might have worked once, when I still cared about keeping up appearances, when I still believed I could make everyone happy if I just tried harder. Not anymore. I blocked his number. Rita invited me to dinner at her apartment above the bookstore. She was a wonderful cook, preparing a feast of homemade pasta and fresh bread that filled her cozy home with mouth-watering aromas. Her walls were lined with bookshelves, paintings, and framed photographs, a life richly lived and proudly displayed. 30 years I was married to a man who thought my bookstore was a cute hobby, she told me over tiramisu. When he left me for his secretary, so cliché, right? Everyone thought I'd fall apart. Instead, I bought this building with the divorce settlement. "That's incredible," I said, genuinely impressed. "The best revenge isn't just living well," she winked, refilling my wine glass. "It's living authentically, being exactly who you are without apology." After dinner, we sat on her small balcony overlooking the street. Below us, Somerville pulsed with life, students laughing, couples walking hand in hand, food delivery bicycles zipping past. I thought about Mark and Sarah in that sterile house in the suburbs, planning dinner parties to impress people they didn't even like. "I have no idea what happens next," I admitted. "I've been so focused on getting out, I haven't thought much about where I'm going." Rita smiled. "That's the exciting part, isn't it? The blank page. You get to write it however you want." As I walked back to my apartment that night, her words echoed in my mind. A blank page, a fresh start. For the first time since I'd left, I felt not just relief, but genuine excitement about the future. My future, shaped by my own hands. Weeks passed, and slowly, a new rhythm emerged in my life. My editing work provided enough income to cover the apartment when Lily's cousin's free month ended. It wasn't luxurious, but there was something deeply satisfying about paying my own rent, making my own choices, answering to no one. The restraining order had its intended effect. Mark stopped trying to contact me directly, though I heard through mutual friends that he was telling everyone I was having a midlife crisis or a nervous breakdown. Let him say what he wanted. Those who mattered knew the truth, and those who believed him without question weren't people I needed in my life anyway. My divorce lawyer, Carol, kept me updated on the proceedings. Mark was contesting everything, of course, drawing out the process in what she described as a classic control tactic. He thinks if he makes this difficult enough, you'll give up and come back, she explained during one of our meetings. Men like him can't accept rejection. It threatens their entire self-image. He won't wear me down, I assured her. I'd rather have nothing than go back. I meant it. Though the financial insecurity was stressful, Mark had frozen our joint accounts despite Carol's warnings not to. There was a freedom and simplicity I'd forgotten existed. My studio apartment was small, but it was mine. Every item in it was something I'd chosen. Every decision from what to eat for dinner to what time to go to bed was mine alone. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, momentarily disoriented, expecting to hear Mark's breathing beside me or feel the weight of obligation pressing down. Instead, I'd find myself alone in my twin bed, moonlight streaming through curtains I'd sewn myself from fabric I'd found at a local shop. The relief was so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Rita had become both friend and mentor, offering me part-time work at Turning Pages when she learned I had publishing experience. 3 afternoons a week, I helped with inventory, ordering, and customer recommendations. The modest paycheck supplemented my editing income, but more importantly, it connected me to a community of book lovers who became a kind of chosen family. "You've got good instincts," Rita observed after I'd successfully recommended books to several customers. "You listen to what people are really asking for, not just what they say they want." It was a skill I'd developed as an editor, hearing the story beneath the story. Somehow I'd forgotten to apply it to my own life, to hear what my own heart was really asking for beneath the noise of others' expectations. Lily dragged me to a yoga class at a studio near my apartment, insisting physical movement would help process the emotional turmoil. I'd resisted at first. Sarah had always made snide comments about those yoga women with their inappropriate stretching, but found myself returning week after week. There was something powerful about reconnecting with my body after years of neglect, of feeling muscles strengthen and flexibility return. "You're standing taller," Jen, my cousin, remarked when she visited from New Hampshire. We were walking along the Charles River, the Boston skyline glittering across the water. "You even look different." I'd thought she was exaggerating until I caught a glimpse of myself in a store window one day. The woman reflected back wasn't the faded, careful person I'd become in my marriage. Her eyes were clear, her stride purposeful, her expression open. She looked like the Emma I used to be, but with something new, a hard-won wisdom perhaps, or simply the quiet confidence of someone who had faced her fears and survived. Not everything was smooth, of course. There were days when doubt crept in, when financial worries overwhelmed me, when the sheer magnitude of rebuilding a life from scratch seemed impossible. On those days, I'd walk to the river and watch the rowers gliding across the water, their movements synchronized, purposeful, moving forward, stroke by stroke. One such afternoon, sitting on a bench near Harvard Bridge, I overheard a young couple arguing nearby. The woman's voice rose in frustration. "You always do this. You say we'll decide together, then you go ahead and make plans without me." The man's response was dismissive, eerily familiar. "You're being too sensitive. It's not a big deal." I watched her face fall, saw her shoulders curl inward as she made herself smaller. Something twisted in my chest. Recognition, empathy, a jolt of remembering. How many times had I had that exact exchange with Mark? How many times had I shrunk myself to accommodate his dismissal? Before I could stop myself, I stood and walked over to them. "Excuse me," I said, my heart hammering. I couldn't help overhearing, and I just wanted to say something. I turned to the young woman, whose eyes were wide with surprise. If someone makes you feel like your feelings don't matter, that's not okay. It's not being too sensitive to want respect. The man blustered, offended. "This is a private conversation. You have no right." "You're right," I acknowledged. "I'm sorry for intruding. I looked at the woman again, who was studying me with curious intensity. 5 years from now, you don't want to be sitting where I am, starting over because you ignored the warning signs. I walked away then, half mortified at my boldness, half exhilarated by it. The old Emma would never have intervened in a stranger's relationship. The old Emma would have minded her own business, kept her head down, avoided conflict at all costs. This new Emma, or perhaps the original Emma, finally unburied, couldn't stay silent watching history repeat itself. Later that week, I received an unexpected email from my former boss at the publishing house, Marion. "The freelance work you've done for us has been exceptional," she wrote. "We have an opening for a senior editor position. Would you be interested in coming in to discuss?" I stared at the screen, hardly daring to believe it. The job I'd once been on track for before leaving to support Mark's career. The job I'd convinced myself I didn't really want, because wanting it would have meant acknowledging how much I'd given up. I wrote back immediately. I would be very interested. When would you like to meet? The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I spent the weekend alternating between excitement and terror, trying on every professional outfit I'd managed to bring from my old life. Nothing felt right, either too reminiscent of my subdued Mark's wife persona or impractical for the commute from Somerville to the publishing house in downtown Boston. "You need something new," Rita declared when I confessed my wardrobe crisis. "Something that says, I am a professional badass who knows exactly what I'm doing." She took me to a small boutique owned by a friend of hers in Cambridge. The owner, Diane, was a former corporate lawyer who'd left her firm to pursue her passion for fashion design. "Another escapee," she said with a knowing smile when Rita explained my situation. "Welcome to the club." With their help, I found a perfectly tailored navy blazer, slim black pants, and a silk blouse in a deep teal that made my eyes look more green than brown. The outfit wasn't flashy or trendy, but it was undeniably confident. "There she is," Rita said approvingly when I emerged from the dressing room. "Editor Emma." The morning of the interview, I woke early, nerves jangling. What if I'd forgotten how to be professional? What if 5 years of having my confidence systematically undermined had permanently damaged my abilities? What if Marion had only offered the interview out of pity? I caught myself spiraling and took a deep breath. This was the voice of doubt Mark and Sarah had planted in my head. It wasn't the truth. I took the red line to Park Street, then walked the few blocks to the publishing house's offices. The familiar building brought a rush of memories. Late nights discussing manuscripts, heated debates about cover designs, the camaraderie of people united by their love of words. This had been my world once. It could be again. Marion met me in the lobby, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Emma, you look wonderful." We rode the elevator to the 10th floor, catching up on industry gossip. The office had been remodeled since my time there. More open plan, fewer walls, lots of plants and natural light. But the essential energy remained, the creative hum of ideas being born and shaped. The interview was with Marion and 2 other editors I knew from before. There were no trick questions, no attempts to undermine me, just a straightforward discussion about books, editing approaches, and the future of publishing. I spoke with a confidence that surprised me, offering opinions I would have kept to myself in my married days, challenging assumptions when I disagreed. "You've changed," Marion observed as she walked me out afterward. "In a good way. You used to be so careful about what you said, always looking for the safe answer." I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. I spent a long time being careful. It didn't work out so well for me. 2 days later, they offered me the job. The salary was better than I'd expected, the benefits comprehensive, the work exactly what I loved doing. I accepted immediately. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment. As I savored homemade gnocchi and a glass of good Chianti, I thought about the woman I'd been just 2 months ago, afraid to speak up, afraid to want things, afraid to believe I deserved better. "Would you like dessert?" the waiter asked, clearing my plate. The old Emma would have declined, not wanting to indulge or draw attention. The new Emma smiled and said, "Yes, I'm celebrating tonight. What do you recommend?" As I walked home later, belly full and heart fuller, I realized something profound. Reclaiming myself wasn't just about escaping Mark and Sarah. It was about reclaiming joy, desire, opinion, appetite, all the human experiences I denied myself to make others comfortable. It was about remembering that I had always been worthy, even when they made me feel small. Most importantly, it was about promising myself I would never again become invisible in my own life. 6 months later, autumn painted Somerville in rich hues of gold and crimson. I walked home from the Davis Square tea station, leaves crunching beneath my boots, breathing in the sharp, clean scent of October. My phone buzzed with a text from Carol. Final divorce papers ready for signature, tomorrow at 10. A sense of calm settled over me. The end of one chapter, the continuation of another. Mark had finally stopped fighting when Carol had made it clear he would only incur more legal fees with no change in outcome. The house would be sold, the proceeds split. My portion would be enough for a down payment on a small place of my own if I chose. My apartment above Turning Pages had become more than just a refuge. I'd painted the walls a warm sage green, hung artwork I loved, filled the windowsills with thriving plants. Rita joked that I was single-handedly keeping the local garden center in business. Maybe I was overcompensating for all those years in a home where nothing could be changed without Sarah's approval. But watching things grow gave me a satisfaction I couldn't quite explain. At the publishing house, I'd found my stride quickly. My first major acquisition, a debut novel by a Vietnamese-American writer telling the story of 3 generations of women, had sparked a small bidding war with other publishers. When we won, Marian had taken me out for champagne. "You've got the eye, Emma," she'd said, clinking her glass against mine. "You always did." The book would be published next spring. I'd already started planning the launch event, determined to give this new voice the platform she deserved. My social circle had expanded beyond Lily and Rita to include colleagues, neighbors, and members of the book club I'd joined at the Cambridge Public Library. Weekends were filled with gallery openings, impromptu dinners, walking tours of historic neighborhoods. Sometimes I still marveled at how full life could be when it wasn't constrained by someone else's expectations. Not every day was perfect, of course. I still had moments of doubt, sudden panics about the future, the occasional nightmare where I was back in that house, scrubbing floors while Sarah criticized and Mark ignored me. But those moments came less frequently now, and I had tools to manage them when they did. My therapist, Dr. Chen, had been instrumental in helping me recognize the patterns of my marriage. "What you experienced was emotional abuse," she'd said plainly in one of our early sessions, both from Mark and his mother. The word abuse had made me uncomfortable at first. It seemed too strong, too dramatic for what I'd experienced. There had been no violence, no shouting, just the slow, steady erosion of my sense of self. Abuse doesn't have to leave bruises to cause harm, Dr. Chen had explained. Sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones nobody can see. Over time, I'd come to accept the truth of her words. The constant criticism, the isolation from friends and family, the subtle undermining of my confidence. These weren't just unfortunate dynamics in an imperfect marriage. They were deliberate tactics to keep me dependent and compliant. Understanding this didn't magically heal everything, but it helped me stop blaming myself for not trying hard enough, for not being patient enough, for not loving enough to make it work. Some relationships couldn't work because they were fundamentally unbalanced, built on control rather than respect. On a rainy Sunday in November, I was returning from brunch with Lily when I saw him. Mark was standing outside Turning Pages, umbrella in hand, looking up at the building as if trying to confirm the address. My heart lurched, then settled. The restraining order had expired last month, and I hadn't renewed it, feeling it was no longer necessary. I could have turned around, avoided the confrontation. Instead, I walked directly toward him. "Mark." He spun around, startled. "Emma, I was just... What are you doing here?" My voice was steady, neither hostile nor welcoming. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a new tension in his jaw. "I wanted to talk to you. Before tomorrow, before everything's finalized. We don't have anything to talk about that can't go through our lawyers. Please." He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that once meant he was stressed, that once would have prompted me to soothe him. "Can we go somewhere? Just for a coffee?" I considered refusing, then decided against it. Whatever he had to say, hearing it might provide closure for us both. "There's a cafe around the corner." 10 minutes. The cafe was busy with Sunday patrons, but we found a small table near the window. Mark ordered a black coffee. I got a chai latte. We sat in awkward silence until our drinks arrived. "You look good," he finally said. "Really good." "Thanks." I didn't return the compliment. He didn't look good, and I was done with polite lies. "So, this is where you've been hiding? Somerville?" His tone was slightly condescending, as if my choice of location confirmed something about me. "I haven't been hiding. I've been living." I took a sip of my chai. "What did you want to talk about, Mark?" He shifted in his seat. "Mom went back to Providence last month." I waited for him to continue, not offering the sympathetic response he was clearly fishing for. "The house feels empty without her, without anyone." He stared into his coffee. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About what happened. And what conclusions have you reached?" I kept my voice neutral, curious but detached. "I think we could try again." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "I know things weren't perfect, but what marriage is. We had good times too, Emma. We could get counseling, work through our issues." For a moment, I was speechless. Of all the things I'd imagined he might say, this hadn't been one of them. "Work through our issues," I repeated slowly. "What exactly do you think our issues were?" He looked uncomfortable. "Communication, obviously. Expectations. My mother's involvement, which I know was a problem for you." "A problem for me," I echoed. The old Emma would have let this pass, would have shouldered the blame to keep the peace. The new Emma couldn't. "Our issue wasn't that your mother was involved in our marriage. It was that you consistently chose her comfort, her opinions, her feelings over mine. It was that you watched her belittle and criticize me for years and never once stood up for me. That's not fair. Our issue wasn't communication. It was that when I did communicate, you dismissed me. You told me I was being sensitive, demanding, unreasonable." The words flowed easily now, without anger but with absolute clarity. "Our issue wasn't expectations. It was that your expectations for me, perfect house, perfect meals, perfect submission, were inhuman, while your expectations for yourself were practically non-existent." He looked stunned, as if he'd expected a very different conversation. "I never asked you to be perfect. You never had to ask. You and Sarah made it abundantly clear that nothing I did was ever good enough." I took another sip of my chai, surprised by my own composure. "But that's not even the real problem, Mark. The real problem is that I disappeared in our marriage, year by year, piece by piece, until I was just a function, not a person. That's not how I saw it." His voice had a defensive edge now. "I know. That's also part of the problem." I set my cup down and looked him directly in the eyes. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even hurt. I'm just clear. And what's clear to me is that I'm happier now, on my own, than I ever was with you." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "You don't mean that." "I do." I said it gently, not wanting to wound but needing him to understand. "I have a job I love, friends who value me, a life that feels like mine. I'm not coming back, Mark. Not tomorrow, not ever. Because of one bad visit with my mother? One fight?" His voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. I shook my head. It wasn't one visit or one fight. It was 5 years of 1,000 little moments where my worth was questioned, where my voice was silenced, where my needs came last. The day I left wasn't the problem. It was the solution. He stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Not acceptance exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding that this wasn't a negotiation, that some things, once broken, couldn't be repaired, or shouldn't be. "I should go," I said, gathering my bag. "I'll see you at the lawyer's office tomorrow." "Emma," he called as I stood, "are you really happy without me?" The question was so nakedly vulnerable, so stripped of his usual confidence that I paused. The truth deserved honesty, not cruelty. "Yes, Mark, I really am. And someday, I hope you find someone who makes you happy too. Someone you can see as an equal, not an accessory." Outside, the rain had stopped. I walked home slowly, processing the encounter. There was a time when seeing Mark would have thrown me into emotional turmoil, when his request to try again might have weakened my resolve. Now I felt only a quiet certainty that I was on the right path. That evening, I sat on my small balcony despite the November chill, wrapped in a blanket, watching the lights come on across Somerville. My phone rang. Marion, calling about a manuscript issue that couldn't wait until morning. As I talked through possible solutions, making decisions with confidence, I realized how far I'd come from the woman who'd needed permission to have opinions. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began writing, not editing someone else's words this time, but my own. The story had been forming in my mind for weeks. A woman's journey from silence to voice, from invisibility to presence. It wasn't my exact experience. The protagonist was older, her circumstances different, but the emotional core was authentic in a way only lived experience could provide. I wrote until midnight, the words flowing easily. Whether it would ever be published didn't matter. What mattered was that I was telling this story, claiming it, shaping it into something that might someday help another woman recognize her own worth before it was too late. The next morning, I signed the divorce papers with a steady hand. As Carol filed them away, she gave me an approving nod. Most people in your position are either crying or looking shell-shocked. You look ready to take on the world. I smiled, thinking of the writing I'd done the night before, the job waiting for me at the office, the dinner plans with friends later that week. Not the whole world, just my corner of it. Outside the lawyer's office, the November sun broke through the clouds, lighting up Boston Common in a burst of unexpected gold. I stepped into that light, face turned upward, embracing whatever came next. The future stretched before me, unwritten and wholly mine.